All right, class, we are going to move on to the resources, self-care, and assignments portion of this lecture. Just a quick recap and giving you some resources. So a lot of times I will give out resources that maybe pertain to the things that we've discussed this week in our lecture, or weeks previous, or some of the topics that we're hitting in class. But this week, I wanted to kind of throw a little bit of a curveball in terms of resources and give you really a resource that's awesome for both personal and professional use, but it doesn't necessarily have a lot to do with the topics that we've been covering this far into our course. And so the book that I'm going to talk about really quickly and offer as a resource is a book called Safe People by Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend. Now, these are the authors that have written the Boundaries series. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, especially if you've worked or volunteered in churches or maybe you've taken classes. They write all sorts of books like Boundaries, Boundaries in Marriage, Boundaries with Teenagers, Boundaries with Kids. And this book actually they wrote this book prior to writing their Boundaries series because they definitely hit on boundaries in here, and this kind of prompted their Boundaries series to go more in depth. They are absolutely wonderful authors, very, very gifted therapists, psychologists. So the little tagline here, it's Safe People, and the little tagline says, how to find relationships that are good for you and avoid those that aren't. And now when I picked up this book, I admit I was kind of in a place of my life where I felt like I had a lot of kind of unsatisfactory relationships, a lot of relationships where I felt like I was giving and giving and giving and wasn't getting anything in return. And so when I found this book, I thought, when I read that tagline, I thought, oh, this is going to be a really great resource for me to read and kind of will give me that permission to get those people out of my life. So in a way, there was a little bit of selfishness that was involved in it, because I thought this is going to kind of be my excuse. This is kind of what I can hinge back on my foundation. And kind of get those unhealthy people out of my life. So I started reading this book, and the book is split up into 3 different sections. The first one is really kind of describing what are unsafe people, or what are some of the characteristics of unsafe people. And I'll just read a few just so you guys get an idea. So unsafe people are people that think they have it all together instead of admitting their weaknesses. They're defensive instead of open to feedback. They avoid working on their problems and instead of dealing with, they avoid working on their problems instead of dealing with them. That's what I was meaning to say. There are people that are stagnant instead of wanting to grow. These are people who lie instead of telling the truth. Unsafe people are people that are only concerned about I instead of we. There are people that resist freedom instead of encouraging it. They're people that flatter instead of confronting. They're people that condemn instead of forgive. And so the first section of this book goes through, and it definitely identifies different characteristics of what an unsafe person was. And of course, as you're going through, it can be very encouraging, because you're able to kind of identify, wow, there's a lot of relationships in my life that are really characterized by these types of people. And it starts to make sense that relationships would be unsatisfactory. But the second part of this book is really kind of the meat of the book, and this is where they kind of, what I call, go in for the kill, because they really come with this premise that if the majority of the relationships in our lives are with people who would have these unsafe characteristics, it's a very unbalanced relationship. They ask the question, do I attract unsafe people? And really they're going, if you're the common denominator here in all of your relationships, what is it about you that potentially is attracting this type of people? Is there something that maybe you're doing? They call it a deficit that you have. Is there something in your life that you're doing or not doing that is really attracting safe people? And so they talk about, why do I choose unsafe relationships? Is it isolation, fear, and abandonment? That if we didn't have these unsafe relationships, we would fear that abandonment. maybe there's an inability on our part to judge character. Maybe there's things in our lives that we haven't faced. Maybe there's fear of confronting people in our lives. And so they really go through a lot of different characteristics and reasons why you might be attracting unsafe people. And it's kind of one of those moments where you really have the opportunity to look at yourself and to kind of just do that inventory and to check to see where do you kind of fall in all of this. And then, of course, the final part of the book is kind of that what now section. So how do I look for safe people? How do I engage with unsafe people and not let them take over my life? And so I wanted to give you this book both as a resource, but also as that self-care piece. Of course, when we are in a helping relationship or with a formal client or maybe at a church or through mentoring or those sorts of things, we're going to be faced with all sorts of people. And the more you get into counseling in that helping profession, you'll notice that people really are drawn to you, that they really do appreciate your advice and encouragement in those sorts of things. But that doesn't mean that you have to continually give and give of yourself at the expense of yourself. And so this book does a really good job of just talking about how you can really build safe people in your life that encourage you so that you actually have the ability then to have people in your life that maybe can't mutually give back to you, but that you can still feel like you can be a part of their life and they're not going to be taking so much from you. So like I said, that's both the resource and a little bit of self-care, just so that you can, it's something that you can be thinking through it, especially as you move further into this helping profession. So this week, let's look at assignments really quickly. We have our group discussion board, and that's going to be asking us to define the difference between crisis and trauma. So you can feel free to use examples from your own life. You don't necessarily have to use the textbook in order to show that you have a good understanding of the differences between these two concepts. And of course, your initial post is going to be due Thursday at 11:59 Central Standard Time, and then at least 2 follow-up posts are due, responding to your classmates by Sunday at 11:59 Central Standard Time. Of course, if you are citing resources and using external information, you are definitely going to need to make sure to cite that in APA format. Other than our group discussion board, there is no formal assignment that's due this week. Of course, we do have the educational pamphlet due next week, and then the weeks after that, we've got several other assignments. So again, I'm going to encourage you just to make sure that you are using this time wisely and setting yourself up to really not have so much to do at the back half of this course. And of course, there is reading due from each of our texts this week. So that will be the other part of the assignment. So other than that, that will do it for this video. Again, congratulations on surviving week 1. Y'all have done a great job. I look forward to continue getting to know you on the group discussion board, and I'm thankful for already what you have brought to this class. Have a great day.